couple times ago when we were talking, I just glibly referenced the reality that so many of us deal with, which is being at odds with somebody you only see at family holiday events, weddings, things like that. And you know you're going to have to see that person. You know it's going to be weird. Maybe it's somebody who's on the outs with the entire family, but they still come to these things. Maybe it's your own dang fault. And as you listen to me talk about this, you're immediately like, this is supposed to be fun. Like the first part is supposed to be like fart jokes and stuff. And now you're bringing up the thing that I feel bad about because I'm not picking up the phone and I'm not calling that person and I'm still not going to do it. Or maybe you're the person who's on the receiving end and you feel jilted by it. Wherever you are in relationship to that family awkwardness, you know what it's like to have a family incident at an important get-together or a holiday event. Then you got to consider with me this one in Matthew chapter 26. And if nothing else, this one will probably make us all feel better about whatever little ongoing feuds or sideways relationships that we aren't able to bring back into a place of health. Because this one, it goes sideways and it stays sideways. We're looking at the stuff about this Passover meal. So this must be Thursday night, I think is the way it would be calculated. There's a little bit of discrepancy on that in terms of days of the week. It looks on the surface like there might be some tension between Matthew and pretty sure it's John's account. I'm surely it's John's account. And maybe at some point I'll unpack that. I don't know. I think most of those chronological controversies that get brought up from time to time regarding Passion Week are pretty easily resolved by just considering the Roman/Greek reckoning of days of the week and when a day is over and when the next day starts versus the historical Jewish read on that versus the more modernistic influenced by the Greek read on that. For you and me, it's simple because we got like this global military time thing. At midnight, it flips over and there's a line that goes around the world and that tells you how it works for all of planet Earth. And you can just add the thing up and you can science it. I don't think you could science it back then. Things operated more in hours and a little bit more in the way of generalization. So maybe that's something that if I'm just looking to punish myself, we could go and dig into sometime. But at the most basic level, I think that one resolves itself. Back to this, though. This is the big meal. This is the Passover meal. This is the one where the head of the household would preside over it. And there were certain dance steps. That sounds a little bit demeaning, but I don't mean it that way. I mean, there's certain things that you do. They're phases to the meal and rituals and stuff that involves the kids. And that all means something. And you do the whole thing. And the head of the household facilitates all of that. And so, well, who would the head of the household, who would the head of the family be in this situation? And in a sense, to the attentive first century Jewish reader, to the attentive original audience member, this is one of those places where you're like, oh, that's actually a payoff from a thing that happens earlier in the book of Matthew. The head of the household is Jesus in this example. And he is hosting for his new family of faith. Remember at the end of Matthew chapter 12, when Jesus' mom and siblings are like, we're still not quite sure what to make of this. Are you aware of the pressure that you are under? You're going to get yourself in huge trouble. You're maybe kind of embarrassing us a little bit. And so they show up when Jesus is talking right before he gives the whole kingdom parables discourse of Matthew 13. And they don't even go in to where Jesus is teaching. They're sitting outside and they send somebody in to be like, yeah, go retrieve Jesus. And so somebody comes in and is like, hey, your mother and brothers are standing outside wanting to speak to you. This is like mid-talk. It's weird. It's uncomfortable. And he replies to them, Matthew 12:48, who is my mother and who are my brothers? Pointing to his disciples, he said, here are my mother and my brothers. For whoever does the will of my Father in heaven is my brother and sister and mother. And even that is playing off of a theme that goes all the way back to John the Baptist in the early going. It's got to be chapter 3. It is, I don't know what verses exactly, but it's all the stuff about the religious leaders coming out and John fires back at them and he says all this stuff about you're a brood of vipers, who warned you to flee the coming wrath, and some stuff about repentance, and you got to demonstrate evidence of repentance, turning from the ugly ways that then go on to play out all the way through the book of Matthew. And then John challenges them to quit it with just saying like, oh, well, we have Abraham as our father, and so we're good. And he says that out of rocks or natural things, God could raise up children for Abraham. The axe is already at the root of the tree. And so everything about the tensions that play out in Matthew are present in John's rebuke, but also proactively what's present in John's rebuke is the suggestion that there is a new family of faith that goes beyond the family of faith established in the covenant with Abraham, way, way back at the very beginning of things in Genesis, where God says, I'm going to make this great nation, this great people out of you, and I'm going to bless you, and the nations will be blessed through you. And then you get the covenant with Moses that happens over the course of several chapters, between like chapter 20 and chapter 30 something. It's a big spread out covenant that's kind of hard to pin down into one thing throughout the book of Exodus, where God reiterates, like, I'm going to be your God and you're going to be my people. And if you obey me, I'm going to bless you. And if you disobey me, I'm going to punish you. Those are the ground rules for what the relationship is between God's chosen people, his family of faith, and God throughout the whole Old Testament. And now right from the very beginning of the book of Matthew, we're seeing language that points toward Jesus being the new and greater Abraham, the new and greater Moses, the completion, not the deletion of those guys, and that there is a new family of faith, and the boundaries of the new family of faith are not going to be ethnic, as is hinted at in the passage we just looked at in Matthew chapter 12, with Jesus' family members and what Jesus said there before he gives the kingdom parables discourse. But it's more heavily demonstrated just a couple of chapters later in, say, the conversation Jesus has with the Canaanite lady who has the debate with him about healing her daughter. And it's obviously hinted at Jesus' interaction in chapter 8 with the Gentile, the Roman centurion who is there, and then Jesus' routes of travel and the people he would have been interacting with during some of the miraculous feedings. All of this suggests that the old family of faith is not the end game, but that there is a newer, greater, more full completion of this concept of the family of faith, and that the boundary markers are people who've bent the knee to Jesus as king, people who've embraced the kingdom values, people who do the will of his Father. Fast forward to a family meal then, with the head of the household overseeing this family meal. And if we understand it that way, as the original audience would have understood it, then the discomfort that comes down the pike here, no pun intended, that again, it's always, if it's a pun and it's me, it's an accident and I apologize. The discomfort that we get here, if we think of it as a familial betrayal, is even more hard-hitting than if we think of it as some kind of club or gang of pals who've roamed around like college buddies and have bummed around for a bit. No, indeed, this is family. And so when we read that the meal is cruising along and then Jesus disrupts it with a stunning announcement, the betrayal and the pain that maybe you have felt at a family event here or there is in duplicate, triplicate, the crazy, off the charts, exponentially more painful than the kind of thing you or I have ever felt, because Jesus is saying that a member of this new family is going to betray not just the head of the household, but it's going to betray the entire redemptive plan that is what their whole family has been about. So again, it goes like this. Verse 20, when evening came, Jesus was reclining at the table with the 12. We'll talk more tomorrow about what that looked like and why that matters. But then verse 21, and while they were eating, he said, I tell you the truth, one of you will betray me. That is a grenade into the room. That is a huge deal. If you're a bunch of pals on a softball team, it is a much huger deal if you are family. And taking this meal together, the way they were taking it, means they were indeed family. Maybe the first representation of the new family of faith, taking this meal that would be repeated and that has been repeated again and again and again and again, constantly throughout all of Christian history since. Wow, the implications are gigantic, and the tragedy of it is gigantic as well. More Last Supper stuff next time around. I'm Matt. This is the 10-Minute Bible Hour podcast. Let's do this again soon.